Harihi Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Jaya Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jai. So yesterday we were talking about how we can determine what is proper action. Because we're told that when we're preaching, we shouldn't be expecting anything in return. But also sometimes we need to make a livelihood, so is it okay, for example, to open up a bookstore and sell Krishna conscious books, or a restaurant to sell prasadam, etc. So the general rule of thumb is, depending on where our consciousness is, what our level of conditioning is, the external will be different, right? So if we're in a position where we feel the need to make a livelihood, to have some sort of job, then it's best that we try to choose that job based on what we know to be important, right? Even if we're on the neophyte level. So long ago, when I was in college, I accepted a job it was at an airport, but it was the coffee shop. And I thought, all right, coffee, it's not that big of a deal. I can sell coffee and newspapers and, paperback books for people to read on an airplane. I accepted the job. The person taught me how to make the lattes and the cappuccinos. But what he didn't tell me was that sometimes people order, Hare Krishna, sometimes people order breakfast sandwiches. And they're made out of things that I won't touch. So I quit that job immediately, because that's absolutely not favorable to devotional service. So depending on where we are, we can accept certain things. If we feel the necessity, in other words, we're not detached enough to just say, okay, Krishna's going to provide everything. If we're not that comfortable in giving all of the control to Krishna, and we are insisting on putting forth some sort of effort, we should calculate which actions that we can do and what is going to be the best for our consciousness. So what we can actually be focused on Krishna while doing comfortably. So another example from me is, after I went to college, I had a lot of debt to pay off. And you're really actually supposed to pay that off, otherwise you get in trouble. So I felt the need to accept some sort of job. And part of my conditioned nature is that I'm an artist. I'm semi-creative. And so while I was looking for a job, I found this place that Makanchor Gopal Krishna is on the business card, and on the t-shirts that the people wear, there are pictures of Krishna and Arjuna around the entire shop. And I thought, okay, yeah, I could work here. I could do art here at this place. It wasn't the ideal situation, but again, the circumstance was need to pay off debt. I felt that obligation. I didn't feel comfortable at that point in saying, well, Krishna, if you want to pay off this debt, do as you like. So I took the job. I did it. There was kirtan playing. Very rarely did anyone actually ask what the kirtan was, so there wasn't much preaching involved, but at least I was surrounded by pictures of Krishna. So depending on where our consciousness is, we can engage in these different things as long as we're constantly trying to progress in Krishna consciousness, to step out of the center more and to understand that, to act knowing that Krishna is the center. So that's going to determine whether it's okay for us to open up a bookstore or a restaurant or whatever duty we're going to engage in. It'll depend on where we're coming from. That's why Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana is such an important thing to understand. Because if we don't know where we are relative to where we want to be, then we're just going to be lost for a very long time. So we can get distracted by details. Say, for example, we know someone who is very successful in a prasadam restaurant. I heard from a friend of mine recently that there was a group of devotees, they opened up a restaurant, and they were absolutely clear that this is a Hare Krishna restaurant. This is prasadam, there's chanting going on, there's preaching, and it was very successful. People were coming, they were happy, and they were, buying the food, so they made money. Sometime later, the same business was taken over by someone else, and it was in a different location. But they thought, you know what, maybe it's better if we're not so upfront about being Hare Krishnas. Maybe it's making people feel uncomfortable. So they were still offering the food, but it wasn't focused on that anymore. It was, okay, they had a good business model, let's do it, but let's not be too upfront about this whole Krishna thing. We'll keep that in the background. And they didn't make money. So they're following a similar business model, but where they made the change and where they thought they were making the change for a good cause, they were taking Krishna out of the center of it. Even though he was there, he was in their mind, their food was being offered, but they just didn't want to disturb the minds of the general public, so they just said, oh, it's vegetarian food, like that. So the appeal's not there anymore because the consciousness isn't as connected. So to whatever extent we can connect our consciousness and engage our nature in Krishna service, we can accept whatever detail is available at the time. And so that should always be the determining factor on whether we engage in some activity or not. Is it going to be favorable? Okay, I'll accept it. If it's going to be detrimental, then I reject it, no matter what it is. We don't just say, okay, this model was successful for this devotee, so I'm just going to do that because it was successful. Follow in the footsteps. But if we really want to follow in the footsteps, we find out why was that first business model successful? And the reason is because they were focused on Krishna. So if you can focus on Krishna, you don't know anything about restaurants, but you can do woodwork. You can make book stands or whatever the case may be. In other words, you do whatever your nature is, but with the proper consciousness that these successful devotees did. So we don't want to copy their details. We want to find out what the principle was and why they were so successful, right? So that'll determine it. But as far as preaching goes, when we're preaching, we shouldn't expect anything in return, because that's the nature of it. It's the absolute truth. It was given to us. We're giving it back, right? Yes.
Well, we shouldn't expect anything in return, but we also heard that, some famous Mayavadi, he said, when they give me money and my hands automatically they go back. And Srila Prabhupada said, oh, when someone wants to give me money, I'm taking them with one hand and immediately I want to take more with the other. So how to combine these two things?
Say the two things again?
We should not be interested from the gain, from the result, but we see Srila Prabhupada apparently
Yes.
interested.
So it means that whatever comes of its own accord, and it's coming from Krishna. The first thing that we have to understand is the person handing us the money isn't the one giving us the money. Krishna is giving the money. He's inspired the person to give us the money. We should in no way feel obligated to the person that's handing us the money. We should in no way feel that we have to adjust anything to suit their needs. That's the first thing. The second thing is, whatever is coming has to be engaged in Krishna's service. And Srila Prabhupada was very, very clear about that. Not a farthing should be spent outside of the propagation of the Krishna consciousness movement. So, and he took very detailed notes on what was coming in, what was going out. We have to be very careful about it. Because the moment we consider that money that's coming in ours, then, so here's another story about me and jobs. So in our conditioned nature, we're dealing with karma, right? So some people have better money karma than others. Some people have terrible money karma. When I was young, I didn't have terrible money karma. It was, in retrospect, it was kind of good. It wasn't that I never had money, but I also, anytime something needed to be done, I always had the exact amount. And it was scary how it happened. Like, I would have 4 jobs at once and I'd be saving up to get something. And I would get, some unexpected bill would come in for the exact amount that I had saved. It was scary how detailed it was. But then on the other side, sometimes, so when I first came to India, I had to get a passport. And I was living in the ashram, so I wasn't even considering that you have to pay to get a passport. I had the application and the photograph, but it wasn't on my radar because we didn't even have an allowance at that point. Like, we didn't go to the store. Everything was there from the temple. So I go with the form and the picture, and I put it on the counter, and then they said, that'll be $83.50. And I was absolutely surprised because I just didn't think of it. It's so naive but that's, I was young and it didn't occur to me that, this is something that you pay for. But anytime someone asks you for money, your tendency is to go like this, even though there's nothing in your pockets. Well, so I went like that, and I had $83.50 in my pocket. Exactly. And I was just like, there you go. So we don't know how it happened, but that has been my money karma. I work really, really hard to save up and it goes away. But somehow, if something is absolutely needed and I don't have anything, somehow it'll appear. So that's actually fairly good in some sense. You would maybe call it neutral because most people want to have extra money, So in that sense, it's not great, but it could have been way worse. I could have always, been in debt. So that was my money karma. But when we come to Krishna consciousness, then Krishna takes away our karma, and then we get what's called Krishna karma. The thing about Krishna karma is, if we still think that we're in control, it looks a whole lot like our conditioned karma, right? So the example, I'll get to it as quickly as possible. There's a long version of the story, but I'll try to tell the short one. So early on in my Krishna consciousness, I was running a preaching center with a god brother of mine. It was the only thing I wanted to do was preach. And so I was very happy to be running this preaching center with my god brother. But something happened over time. He no longer wanted to fund the project, and so preaching center is closed down. So at that point, I had what I call a partial realization that if I'm going to have a preaching center, I can't rely on anyone else, because if you rely on other people, they can let you down, right? So I thought, okay, can't rely on anyone else, so I have to get the right kind of job where I can still run the preaching center and also fund it, right? And, so anyway, I did this whole thing, saved up for college, went to college, was going to be a teacher because you have weekends and summers off. Those are good times for preaching. And I had this whole thing. And the whole time I was trying to save up money for this preaching center. And the whole time I was unable to do so. I'd save up a bunch of money, and then some unexpected bill or some fine, something would happen. And then, away it went. Just like my previous karma before I became a devotee. Then I started studying Srimad Bhagavatam. And in the first canto, Bhishma Dev, he taught me a very important lesson in detachment. He's laying on his bed of arrows. He knows he's about to die. He's preaching to Maharaj Yudhishthira, who no one, including Krishna himself, could console. He felt so bad about the countless lives that were sacrificed just so that he could become emperor, and he regretted it completely. No one could give him any solace. And so Bhishma Dev, this is Yudhishthira we're talking about, Bhishma Dev, he starts preaching to Yudhishthira, right? And he's talking Daivi Varnashrama Dharma, which is Krishna consciousness, using your nature and engaging it to please the Supreme Lord, right? Not just materially being pious in the materialistic Varnashram system, but engaging your nature to elevate your consciousness, to purify your consciousness. And as he's preaching to Yudhishthira Maharaj, pure Krishna consciousness, he sees that it's a good time for him to leave his body. And he says this phrase, which changed my entire life. He says, after he's preaching pure Krishna consciousness, he says, "Now let my thinking, feeling, and willing, which has been for so long engaged in various occupational duties and like that, now be completely focused on Krishna." And so I thought, well, if Bhishma Dev was dissatisfied with his level when he was preaching pure bhakti, then I should never at any point in my life feel comfortable with where I am, right? And I should understand that I am not the doer, I'm not the controller, I'm not the enjoyer. And from that moment on, I got the rest of that, what I call the partial realization earlier, when I said, if I'm going to have this preaching center, I can't rely on anyone. And the rest of that realization is I'm part of anyone that I can't rely on. Because I was relying on my own actions, my own intellect. I came up with a really good plan on how I could do this preaching center, fund it without relying on anyone else. But it wasn't relying on Krishna. It was relying on my idea of how I could please Krishna, right? So Bhishma Dev kind of knocked me over the head and said, "You're doing it wrong." And thankfully I had enough sense to actually listen to him. So from that point on, I had the job that had Krishna, the pictures of Krishna everywhere. From that point on, I had this box. It was a metal box, it locked. And whatever I would make from this job, I would put in that box. And that box was Krishna's. It wasn't mine. And Krishna would test me from time to time to see if I actually consider that Krishna's, or am I considering it mine that I'm giving to Krishna? So sometimes an unexpected bill would come up, just like they used to before. And instead of taking it from the box, I said, well, no, that's not mine anymore, that's Krishna's. So now I have to either pay the bill a little later after I make some more money, or sell something. So that's what I would do. I'd sell something or pay it a little late. But I wouldn't take anything from the box. And as soon as Krishna saw that I actually considered that his money and not mine, within 5 months, I had all of the necessary funds to get the property where I then started a preaching center. The same thing I was trying to save up for over 10 years. All of a sudden, within 5 months, done. So it's the consciousness. That's the very important thing. Why did I start this story? Remind me? Because you asked me, what did you ask me?
I asked you about Srila Prabhupada, that he wanted.
Ah, yes. So, Srila Prabhupada had this understanding that whatever money is given, it's Krishna's. Has to be used accordingly. It's coming from Krishna, and it has to be used directly in his service. So we have to have that mentality. So when we're preaching, it's not that if someone wants to give us something, we say, no, 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 no. You know, Krishna is giving me everything. You know, we have to understand that, yes, Krishna is giving through these people. He's inspiring them, encouraging them. And even sometimes these people that are giving money, they're considering in their consciousness that they're supporting you, which is not the right consciousness. And so it's not ideal. It's best when people are giving with sincerity. But we can still accept it, use it in Krishna's service. I went off on a tangent, didn't I? Yes, but it's okay. Yes, Mata.
I have a question regarding donations. For example, if people, I heard recently Sri Ram Swami Maharaj, he told that we can accept donations if we are able to digest consciousness and karma of people, otherwise we will be damaged by them. And, I think that if we not feel that we are completely understand that we are soul, better to not take it. But I'm not sure, because sometimes people consider that if you reject donations means you are like mostly like jnani, not like bhakti, because you're afraid of material nature. But is it proper on the level if we not if we not feel that we are soul, or we should do it? Because if we get donation, we then should think how to use them properly, that people get benefit, everyone, and it's so many tensions in mind, and maybe better just reject if you're not ready, or it's not the right way.
So there's a few things you could do there, and I've seen examples of each of the things that I'm about to explain. If you're not confident that you can spend the money properly in Krishna's service, but you know someone that can, you can just hand the donation off. So you're just a delivery person.
Yes, but if
that's one thing.
Sometimes I give to such people, then I know that these people not use this money for properly, and these people didn't get benefit which I expected they will get. Then I also don't know how it's better to do, to whom give.
So it's best to your best knowledge, so I can't see. To your best knowledge, the people that actually use it properly, you give it to them. But you have to give it to them with a sense of detachment, because your consciousness was, they're going to spend it in Krishna's service better than I am. So you give it, and then you give up the mentality of whether they're using it properly or not. So it ends there. You made the assessment prior of whether they are going to utilize it better than you can utilize it. And in that moment, you've made that decision and given it, then you give up any attachment to what they do with it after that.
If, for example, I gave some money to building of temple, but then I got that this money were used by some people.
The next time you just give it to someone else then.
And if I give someone else and he also...
And if it keeps happening, which is the nature of this material world, if that keeps happening and you realize that you could probably utilize it in a better way, then you just start utilizing it in a more direct way. But you have to be detached either way. Either you keep giving it to someone else who you think is going to use it properly and you just hope for the best, or you figure out a way to successfully utilize it. But at no point should you be using any of it for yourself.
No.
That's the most important thing.
I mean, can I just tell you can use all of your money just for Sankirtan, for books distribution?
You can also do that. So that's another thing you could do. So the one thing you could do is just be a messenger. You take it, you give it to someone else. That's one thing. Another thing you could do is suggest that they give it to someone else. If you have places that you recommend, you can do that. I'll give you another, I'm telling a lot of personal stories today. I'll tell another personal story. So I used to live in the Philadelphia temple for a very long time, and one thing that I learned there is that the knives in the kitchen are terrible. They can't cut anything. Like you're better off just breaking stuff. They're dull, like, because it looks like a knife, so it's so frustrating that it doesn't cut anything.
It doesn't do the dharma.
And even worse, right, it doesn't have the dharma of a knife. It looks like it, but it doesn't have it. It's kite of a knife. Worse than the knives were the potato peelers. They never worked. They bought them at like the dollar store. They bought 20 at a time. You could use it for like 1 or 2 potatoes, and then they just didn't work anymore. And then they would just throw them in the garbage can because they only cost, whatever. And so it was easier just to boil the potatoes and then take off the skins with your hands, and then they're soft enough. You could cut it with the non-knife knives after that. So after I moved out of the temple, and this is the time I was working to save up for college to become a teacher. This was part of my big huge plan where I was still in the center. One of my coworkers also sold. There's this brand of knives called Cutco. They have a lifetime warranty. So if it ever gets dull, you send it back and they send you a brand new one, very sharp. If the handle ever breaks, everything about these knives is like superior, and they have lifetime warranty. The handle is made out of the same material that bowling balls are made out of, and I know this because that was the sales pitch. And they took clay, and they had thousands of people squeeze the clay, young people, old people, men, women, and then they determined what the best shape is for everyone's hand. And that's the shape of the Cutco knives. I'm not trying to sell you guys on these knives. I'm just giving you the sales pitch. So they're very impressive, and they have a lifetime warranty. Anytime anything happens, you send it back, you get a brand new one. So I thought, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I don't need knives. I was living, in my car sometimes, so I didn't even cook. But I wanted to get potato peelers for the temple that had a lifetime warranty, because I thought that's going to be an amazing gift. They're very expensive. They're like $100 a piece, which is crazy. But if they last a lifetime, you think how many dollar store potato peelers we threw away. And these actually work nicely. So I said, okay, I want to buy 4 of them. And I got this special box with 4 compartments, and they fit in there very nicely. That looked nice. And I went to the devotee at the temple who I very much trusted, and I said, Prabhu, I'm putting these in your hands. Don't let anyone throw these away. Bring them out for the Sunday feast cut-up. And then as soon as they're done, put them back in this box and lock it away. Don't leave them in the kitchen. He said, no problem. And he absolutely did that for 6 months. And then he moved out of the temple. And then all of those potato peelers went into the garbage. So I was frustrated about that because I thought it out really well. But the thing is, once I gave that over, that's where it ends. It's done. You can't be attached after that. You had the best intentions passing on that donation. If it gets used for another reason, that's not your problem, because you gave with the right consciousness, right? Now, it may affect whether you give to that person again, then that's okay. But that transaction is done. Your consciousness at that time, that's what you gave, then it's done. You have to be detached. That's the Brahminical thing. That's why it says here, the preachers, they're not trying to get anything in return. And so all of us, whatever we're doing, we're not doing anything to get something in return. We're doing it because it's the right thing, as guided by Shastra. So using what you know about the proper dharma, you decided that this person will spend it better than you will. And so you gave it with that consciousness. That's it. That's perfect. And that's where it ends. It's done. Right? And again, if you see that maybe it wasn't used properly, then you give to someone else next time. But as far as that transaction goes, you did the right thing.
Means that people who donate this money, they will get
some benefit? Yes. Because they gave it to you, and you in good consciousness gave it to someone who you thought was going to... So the common thing is that we focus too much on the detail of it. This is the money that this person gave, and it's always the consciousness, though. Because a thing can be either spiritual or material depending on how we're using it, right? Money's the same way. So all we need to focus on is our consciousness. The detail, that's going to be determined by the consciousness, right? If I understand what the proper consciousness is, I'm going to choose what the best detail is in that situation. But it's not the detail that's making it happen, right? So your consciousness was, they're going to use this better than I would use it, so the person that gave it to me, they're going to get more benefit from it, right? Then they're getting that benefit. If that then is used for something else, that wasn't your problem, and it's not the problem of the person that gave it to you either. Does that make sense? I saw Ramanuja's hand go up, and I thought it was yours. Okay, anything else on that? Okay, oh, we didn't even start yet. What time is it? Yeah, it's about what we take half of the class to recap. In the Caitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela, chapter 7, it is written, quote, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates of the Panchatattva distributed the holy name of the Lord to invoke love of Godhead throughout the universe, and thus the entire universe was thankful. Lord Chaitanya dispatched the two generals, Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami, to Vrindavan to preach the Bhakti cult. As Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami were sent toward Mathura, so Nityananda Prabhu was sent to Bengal to preach extensively the cult of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally went to South India, and he broadcast the holy name of Lord Krishna in every town and village and town. Thus the Lord went to the southernmost tip of the Indian peninsula, known as Setubandha. Everywhere he distributed the bhakti cult and love of Krishna, and in this way he delivered everyone. End quote. Mahaprabhu taught, in essence, that the eternal function of the living entity is Krishna Prema, everyone's inherent nature. The living entity can never be separated from this dharma. However, as a result of forgetfulness of Krishna, being deluded by Maya, the living entity has attraction for other things. And this dharma is almost lost, means the original dharma. It has become concealed within the living entity. Thus, the living entity falls into material misery. If the living entity, again, by good fortune, remembers that he is the eternal servant of Krishna, which is Sambandha, then this dharma again appears and the living entity becomes healthy. So in this paragraph, we get the cause of our forgetfulness and the solution to said forgetfulness and the results of solving the forgetfulness. Faith in this truth is the root of all success. Faith, Shraddha, appears in two ways. Some people develop their natural faith as the material influence decreases and the sukritis accrue for many births. Here's a quote from Caitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 23, verse 9. If by good fortune a living entity develops faith in Krishna, he begins to associate with devotees. Another name for Shraddha is Vishvas. Quote, by rendering transcendental loving service to Krishna, one automatically performs all subsidiary activities. This confident, firm faith, favorable to the discharge of devotional service, is called Shraddha. Madhya Lila 22:62. Faith means that by worshiping Krishna, all the living entities' duties are accomplished. Footnote 26. Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, chapter 31, text 14. As pouring water on the root of a tree energizes the trunk, branches, twigs, and everything else, and as supplying food to the stomach enlivens the senses and limbs of the body, simply worshiping the Supreme Personality of Godhead through devotional service automatically satisfies the demigods who are parts of that Supreme Personality. So faith means that by worshiping Krishna, all the living entities' duties are accomplished in the same way that putting food in the stomach is satisfying the entire body. So all we need to do is properly worship Krishna. Then all duties are accomplished.
So basically we can say that the faith is just the degree of you accepting the reality.
Yes.
So to how much you accept reality, this is how much strong faith you have.
Yes. As we surrender unto Krishna, He rewards us accordingly. It's not that we have a problem having faith. We have great faith that this material world will somehow satisfy us if we just perform the right activities. So having faith isn't the issue. We have tons of it. Where we're putting the faith is the problem, right? And so, and it should be a simple thing, because we've had faith that this material world is going to satisfy us for a very long time, yet the material world has not satisfied us, right? So that faith has not been reciprocated, yet we still have such strong faith in it. We do have experience, understanding from Shastra, that if we do put our faith in a very specific process, we'll get a result. And each of us, to some extent, has felt some result in this process. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here right now. Little, lot, whatever. So if we were intelligent beings, we would stick with what works, and we would stop pursuing that which has proven over and over and over again doesn't work. But somehow we're all holding on to hope that if we just do it slightly differently, things are going to change, and I can be the controller and the enjoyer, right? So this is the process. So to whatever extent our faith is letting go of the idea that I'm the center and grabbing on to the proper relationship that Krishna is the center and what my position is to that center and how to act accordingly, then that benefit will be there. Good?
Yeah.
Did I answer something that you didn't ask?
I didn't ask, I was just...
Oh, you were just...
Yeah.
See that? He was just repeating what I said, and I thought it was a question, so I was like clarifying.
No.
You just added more. You added more on what he said.
So I said something, he added, and then I added more.
Yes.
Does anyone else want to add to that?
It's called sadhusanga.
Yeah. You want to add? No? Yeah?
Srila Sharad Swami wrote a big book, Shuddha Bhakti Chintamani, and he told that the difference between religious people and sadhana bhaktas, that they have faith in a God, but we have faith in a bhakti process.
Yeah, process.
This description is about that our faith in the process of sadhana bhakti, not just in God.
Mm.
Yes, and he told if we will chant, for example, 16 rounds, but we don't have the shraddha, if our type of consciousness, like consciousness of religious personality, then we never will go from shraddha to prema. Our development will be in firstly karma mishra bhakti, then jnana mishra bhakti, then yoga mishra bhakti, then stop. Only if we will then get shraddha, then we can be progressive. But otherwise, we can chant 16 rounds, many lives, and it will not work.
Very true. That's why Srila Bhaktivinoda continually points out in this book so far that as soon as we understand that this is in our best interest, we have to take it very seriously. Otherwise, our lives are no better than the animals, because we're just engaging in sense gratification. So as soon as we have that idea, we have to take it, and you can't overstate it. We say you got to take it seriously, but it's much more than that. It has to be our life. There shouldn't be anything else that is driving us to do anything. And it sounds like it should be obvious, like, oh yeah, no, this is the only way that works. This way clearly can't work. So it sounds like we would all just say, oh yeah, of course. Why would I try this inferior thing when this thing is here? You know, literally we have crushed up broken beer bottles and gems, and we're sort of still weighing our choices. Like, well, you know, I could, yeah, it's still shiny. You know, I can make some jewelry out of it. It's, yeah.
Yeah, the two kinds of faith talked here about was
Komala
yeah,
and Dridha.
and Dridha. So also Bhaktivinoda Thakur in I think Anaya Sutras, he makes clear that the Dridha Shraddha we are talking is the stage of Nishtha.
Yes.
So unless the anarthas are removed, then there is always this attachment to karma and jnana, which needs to be purified by following the process of Vaidhi Bhakti. That's why there is no other option that you follow the process of Vaidhi Bhakti. And if one naturally has that full faith in the devotional process, then he can choose to follow the rules which
The show example.
helps to progress from where they are. It's not that they are omitting other rules, but it's they need not focus on those kind of rules.
I have a question. If we will analyze this book, Caitanya Siksamrita, the Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains these 5 levels, and he explains the first is the level of search level, is a level of how do you call it? Session analytica, and the second fourth is the sadhana bhakti, and then bhava bhakti. And when I started to read detailing about it, I realized that he explains that on the level of Seshvara Naitika, we have 2 sub-levels. First, the level of karma, like just religious people who do some rituals. And the second is a more esoteric level, Jnana or yogi, they follow it, but it's still Seshvara Naitika level. And then sadhana bhakti, and as I think in sadhana bhakti, we have the 7 steps of bhakti from Shraddha to Asakti, and we also can divide it on 2 parts, like exoteric, it means Anishtita bhakti, and then esoterics from Nishtha to Asakti, yes? So in this, if we will see this process, we can think that our Anishtita bhakti is just like a bridge between religious consciousness and Nishtita bhakti, yes?
Yes, yes, but the thing is, though it is the bridge, that's where the process begins. That we follow the same process what we are following in Vaidhi Bhakti, even though we reach beyond the stage of Nishtha, Asakti, Bhava. The process is the same. What the 64 principles of Vaidhi Bhakti, the same process. We are using it as a medium for expressing our love to God. But the only difference is now the anarthas are gone and the bhakti has become fixed. So now you can focus on more about offering everything for the sake of, completely for the pleasure of Krishna, rather than focusing on I need to do this activity to purify my body, mind and senses. That's the catch there.
So on level of Anishtita bhakti, we have same desires like in religious level, but we already have a knowledge, yes? Because
and also we have the right process.
Inside the right process. But religious person also can follow, can chant in our society, for example, some people, they think we can chant japa, and we will get some money by this process or something like this. Means they're religious, they're not, like Bhaktivinoda Swami Maharaj, he told in his ISKCON, nowadays we have 90% of religious people, and only 10% of sadhana bhakti. Means religious people also can chant 16 rounds.
Yeah, but the difference comes is from Advaita, the next stage comes is Sadhu Sangha. In the Sadhu Sangha means you're already associating with devotees and you are hearing what they are saying. And Srila Jiva Goswami, he makes 2 different points at 2 different places. The Sadhu Sangha is perfected only when you surrender to the feet of spiritual master, That means now you have taken the process seriously, that I'm surrendering to this one person and I'll follow what he says. I think the next paragraph we come to the same point, that I'm a fool, I don't know anything, and my guru knows. Unless that is stage has come, we are not progressing on the path of sadhana bhakti. We'll still keep hovering around. We may have begun having accepted Prabhupada, but unless the individual jiva surrenders his free will with conviction, this is not like a blind faith, with full conviction that I am, like by my nature, I am insignificant jiva and I require the shelter of the Lord. Only then one moves from this, one is fixed in this sadhana and then moves ahead to Nistha and Asakti. Otherwise it still keeps hovering around, as you were mentioning.
Thank you. Okay, so Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur continues. After performing devotional activities or sukritis unconsciously, the soul becomes satisfied, and from the eternal function of the soul, this natural Shraddha appears. Footnote 27, Srimad Bhagavatam 11:28. If somehow or other, by good fortune, one develops faith in hearing and chanting my glories, such a person, being neither very disgusted with nor attached to material life, should achieve perfection through the path of loving devotion to me. So these two things are very important. We shouldn't be attached to material life, but we also shouldn't be averse to it. It means we have to be attached to Krishna, because aversion is just the other side of the coin to attachment. We're attached to not having it. So we can be disgusted with this material world because it's a terrible place. We can't be satisfied here. But if that's our motive for not liking the material world, and we don't have that positive attachment to Krishna, then it's not helpful. So we have to be neither averse nor attached to material life. Yes.
I just remember Bhagavad one time he explained that being very disgusted is the qualification to practice jnana, and being very attached is the qualification to practice karma. To practice bhakti should be neither too much of this.
Yes. Yeah, that's very good.
There is a whole discussion on that in Bhakti Sandarbha, somewhere around 200. The whole discussion goes saying about, as was mentioning, being disgusted with the material world is how the jnanis see the entire creation. And for devotees, they have to be indifferent
Yes.
to the material. Only then you can focus, as you said.
Yeah, because it's a shadow, it's not substance. So if we actually understand the relationship, the sambandha, then that's it. There's no, it's nothing. It's broken glass compared to gems. It's not even a consideration. Continuing, the person who has developed this faith destroys his material attachments and gradually progresses through the stages of steadiness, taste, attachment, bhava, and prema by practicing devotional activities in the association of devotees. If the natural intrinsic faith appears in an intense way, the devotee practices rag marg. Footnote 28, 11th canto, 20th chapter, verse 9. As long as one is not satiated by fruitive activity and has not awakened his taste for devotional service by Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, one has to act according to the regulative principles of the Vedic injunctions. So we covered that yesterday. Not considering so much the rules of Scripture, he can fearlessly progress in his practices on the path of intense attraction to Krishna. However, if the faith that has developed is weak, then a devotee must progress by taking help of the proper conclusions from the authorized guru. As faith usually starts from faith in the Scripture and instructions of the spiritual master, normally the guidance of Scripture is vital. And then here's this quote. My dear sir, kindly hear the reason. My spiritual master considered me a fool, and therefore he chastised me. You are a fool, he said. You are not qualified to study Vedanta philosophy, and therefore you must always chant the holy name of Krishna. This is the essence of all mantras or Vedic hymns. Simply by chanting the holy name of Krishna, one can obtain freedom from material existence. Indeed, simply by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, one will be able to see the lotus feet of the Lord. In this age of Kali, there is no other religious principle than the chanting of the holy name, which is the essence of all Vedic hymns. This is the purport of all scriptures. After describing the potency of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, my spiritual master taught me another verse advising me to always keep the name within my throat. That should be a capital Me. I didn't catch that one. And then here's a quote. Within the quote, in this age of Kali, there is no alternative, no alternative, no alternative for spiritual progress than the holy name, the holy name, the holy name of the Lord. Lord Caitanya continued, since I received this order from my spiritual master, I always chant the holy name, but I think that by chanting and chanting the holy name, I have been bewildered. While chanting the holy name of the Lord in pure ecstasy, I lose myself, and thus I laugh, cry, dance, and sing just like a madman. Collecting my patience, therefore, I began to consider that chanting the holy name of Krishna has covered all of my spiritual knowledge. I saw that I had become mad by chanting the holy name, and I immediately submitted this at the lotus feet of my spiritual master, which is what we should do if we think something is going wrong, even if we're wrong about something going wrong. So Lord Caitanya said to his spiritual master, my dear Lord, what kind of mantra have you given me? I have become mad simply by chanting this Maha Mantra. Chanting the holy name in ecstasy causes one to dance, laugh, and cry. When my spiritual master heard all this, he smiled and then began to speak. It is the nature of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra that anyone who chants it immediately develops his loving ecstasy for Krishna. Religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation are known as the 4 goals of life. But before love of God, the 5th and highest goal, these appear as insignificant as straw in the street. So that was Caitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 7, verses 71 through 85. Lord Chaitanya's talking to, is it Prakashananda Saraswati there? Because Prakashananda Saraswati was saying, I think you're just sentimental. Why are you always chanting all the time? You're not hearing us talk about Vedanta. And so this was his reply. Well, my spiritual master considered me a fool, so he told me just to chant. And then continuing. From the words, quote, consider this verse and keep it around your neck, end quote, we can understand that faith is nourished and grows by following Scripture. That is how faith grows. This is a very important thing for us to understand. So I've said this before. It's worth repeating as many times as I can say before leaving my body, is that we have these 3 things to check whether something is authorized or not, Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. But actually, it's Shastra, Shastra, and Shastra, because the spiritual master will only instruct you based on Shastra. And the Sadhu's examples, the ones that are actually going to affect our lives in a positive way, are based on what is given in Shastra. So Shastra is very merciful. It comes to us in many different forms. 3 main forms, of course. Itself, the initiating spiritual master, and the sadhus. So we need to take proper advantage of this and have a proper balance of these things. But it's always about Shastra. Faith is nourished and grows by following the Shastra. Continuing. According to Mahaprabhu, Scripture, that is Vedic Scripture, is the only authoritative proof. Rules of logic and argument are no proof. So, I mean, this one's kind of obvious, but at the same time, also has to be spoken again and again. Logically, we can prove almost anything to almost anybody. There was one time that I proved to a room full of people that grass is actually red. And I logically proved it, and I also did it in such a way that not only did it logically seem real, but then I was able to show them through the perception of their own senses that grass is actually red. I could explain the whole thing. Well, I'll give you the brief story. So the logical part is that grass, anything that we come in contact with, is reflecting light, right? So the light that it's reflecting, the grass is reflecting, it's mostly green, but it's actually every color but green. But it's mostly green because that's the one we're perceiving. And since the green is the most perceived, the grass itself is actually red, which is the opposite color to green. So if people don't quite follow that logic, then I hold something green up against a white background and I say, stare at this without blinking for 30 seconds. And you have to stare exactly at it without moving your eyes and without blinking. And then you take the grass away, and what do you see? You see a red blade of grass. So now they've perceived it with their senses. Of course, when I do the logic part, I do it more so that it sounds much more believable. But then they have seen it with their own eyes, and now they believe, oh, grass is red. The issue is, grass isn't red. I was full of baloney. And this sense perception thing is just a trick that you will see the negative of whatever you're looking at. If you stare at something because it burns the image into your eye, you take it away, you see the exact negative. So using faulty logic and basically a magician's trick, I convinced a whole room full of people that grass is actually red, but it's not. So we don't go by just logic and sense perception. We go always from Shastra. The basis always has to be Shastra, otherwise if it's not based on Shastra, it has to be based on illusion. There's no third option, right? Srila Rupa Goswami points out that, let alone any other activity, if we're trying to engage in devotional service and we're not referring to Shruti, Smriti, Puranas, the Pancharatra, then we are only going to create unnecessary disturbances in society. And that's engaging in devotional service. Now, if we're trying to do anything else without referring to Shastra, then the unnecessary disturbances are going to be quite a bit more disturbing, right? So the basis of faith, the basis of anything, has to be Shastra. That's why it's very important to understand this. Because otherwise, as Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur pointed out in the very beginning, that there are countless philosophies, but although attempting to reach the truth, they are all incomplete and mutually conflicting, being generated from illusory premises, right? So we have to only accept philosophy that is based on the proper understanding of Shastra, because people misapply Shastra all the time. That's not what we want to follow. We want to follow the properly applied Shastra, which is why it's important for us to understand the language of the Shastra. Because anyone can put the Shastra in our language. It may be authorized, it may not be. Thankfully, we had Srila Prabhupada. He put it in our language and it was authorized. But it's in our best interest to learn the language that the Vedas is presented in. That way we don't get distracted by the details, which is so easy to do. It's so easy to get caught up in the details and just completely forget about the principle. But if we focus on this, when we're approaching Shastra, and we're approaching Shastra in a humble and a submissive way, sincerely wanting to get clear instructions from Krishna, not just, Krishna, I want you to help me prove that I'm right to all of these people who are doubting me, right? Actually understanding and wanting to know Shastra. If we approach it in that way, then not only we will have the truth, but also our faith will continue to develop. So, is there anything before we stop for today? Yes, Ms. Shai?
Well, so it's an important point. The Acharyas mentioned that faith is not an anga of bhakti.
Hmm.
It is a special prerogative. I forgot the right word, but basically it's a special aspect which enhances or which helps you want to take to devotional process. Recently, when Radha Maharaj came, he explained in a different way that by having faith, one has the impetus to practice the devotional process and gain realization. But faith is not synonymous to realization in Krishna consciousness.
Hmm.
So that's why it's not considered as an anga of bhakti. Just because you have faith doesn't mean you are progressed in bhakti. We need to apply.
Yes.
Application aspect is not.
Yeah, faith is not a passive thing. We tend to think it is. We tend to think, okay, no, I have faith that this is going to happen. And then we don't do anything about it, right? But if I have faith, for example, that, I have a bungee cord tied to me. If I have faith that I can safely jump off of this bridge because, the engineers have calculated my weight and the distance and all of that. If I have faith but I don't jump, is that actually faith? I believe them. I believe their calculations. I may even have understood the calculations. I may have seen people do it. So I have faith. But is it actually faith if I don't jump? That's the question. And so the answer is no. It's some sort of faith, but it's not deep faith. So it's Lokika Shraddha, it's not Shastriya Shraddha. So faith means actually applying that which we know in theory, knowing that Krishna is in control and the result's up to him. So if it comes out favorable, then okay, Hare Krishna. If it comes out unfavorable, that's what it was meant to, how it was meant to turn out. Has nothing to do with me. Hare Krishna. But we have to do it, so it's not a passive thing. You wanted to add something.
In Shuddha Bhakti Chintamani, it was a chapter about qualification of spiritual master, and Srila Sharan Swami Maharaj, on the basis of Bhakti Tattva Viveka, explained the point. He answered the question. Some people ask in ISKCON why Guru should be Uttamadhikari, but our Gurus are not Uttamadhikari, that's why they are not qualified. It's Ritvik's theory. And he explains that in Bhakti Tattva Viveka, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he gave two systems about these levels like Uttama, Madhyama, and
Kanishta.
Kanishta, yes.
That's me.
And he told that we have two systems. First, based on rising the face, and it's around our adhikar. And the second system is about rising our real realization. And it's about, he told, in first case we will be Kanishta Bhakta, Madhyama Bhakta, and Uttama Bhakta, but it's in second. But in first we will be Kanishta Adhikari, Madhyama Adhikari, and Uttama Adhikari. And he told that difference, there is no difference to the level of Nishtha. They are same, like from Shraddha to Anartha-Nivritti, we are Kanishtas, and then Nishtha, it's same, it's Uttamadhikar, it's Madhyamadhikar and Madhyama Bhakta, but after Nishtha there is difference in explanation because from level of Ruchi, we have Uttamadhikar, and we are already Uttamadhikari according to from level of Ruchi. But on the level of, in the system based on our real realization, we can be Uttama, we will be Uttama Bhakta only from the level of Baba. And that's why he told that our spiritual masters who reached the level of Ruchi, they already Uttamadhikari, that's why they can be gurus. But because now we told that faith is actually not anga of process, yes, of bhakti process. I see here he told that if we have the faith in prema, then how our faith will rise it can give us Uttama Adhikar or not, according to this book, Bhaktisiddhanta Viveka. So means rising the face is also very important because it can give us Adhikar. And even he told, that's why from the level of Ruchi, devotee, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Bhaktivinoda Thakur, can practice Raga Bhakti. It's basic qualification for it. It's possible to practice Raga Bhakti from level of Ruchi.
Anything to add? Okay, thank you. So, we'll stop. Om Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.